He was incredibly vague about his past trauma, often deflecting with generalities. While she understood some patients were guarded, his evasiveness felt almost rehearsed. He spoke of immense stress, but his lifestyle, as she understood it, a high-pressure job that required frequent, mysterious travel, seemed to contradict the simplicity of his clinic visits. He never mentioned a family, a partner, or any social life beyond his work, which struck her as odd for someone so seemingly burdened by emotional blockages. It was like trying to assemble a jigsaw puzzle where a few of the pieces clearly belonged to a different box. The air in the penthouse office of Vance Corp was always cold. Not just temperature-wise, though Asher Vance preferred it that way. A crisp, almost sterile chill that mirrored his own demeanor. It was an emotional coldness, a pervasive frost that kept everyone at a respectful, almost fearful distance. Asher Vance, the CEO, was a titan in the tech world, a visionary whose decisions moved markets and shaped futures. His brilliance was undeniable, his strategic mind a marvel, but his personal life was a fortress, impenetrable, rumored to be as barren as a winter landscape. Then there were the small, almost imperceptible details. The quality of his clothes, even his casual wear, was exquisite, clearly custom-made. The subtle, expensive scent of his cologne, which she had initially dismissed as a VIP patient quirk, was far too distinct. And the way he carried himself, even when feigning vulnerability, always retained an air of quiet authority, a habit of command that was almost impossible to mask. He moved like a man who owned every room he entered, not just a stressed patient. He sat behind a vast, polished obsidian desk, the city sprawling beneath him like a glittering, indifferent tapestry. His dark eyes, sharp and intelligent, scanned a financial report, absorbing every detail, every nuance. He was 35, devastatingly handsome in a severe, almost intimidating way. With chiseled features and a lean, powerful build, women and men flocked to him, drawn by his power, his wealth, his enigmatic aura. Yet none ever stayed. None ever truly got close. One afternoon, while waiting for Asher's stress management session to begin, Luna overheard a snippet of conversation in the clinic waiting room. A television was playing a financial news channel, and a reporter was discussing the latest market trends. Suddenly, a familiar name caught her attention. Asher Vance, CEO of Vance Corp, announced record profits today. Luna's head snapped towards the screen. A photo of Asher Vance, the CEO, flashed across the screen. It was Mr. Vance, her patient. Her? The whispers followed him like a shadow. He's married to his work. He's a robot. He's incapable of feeling anything. And then the more salacious, hushed rumors. The ones that hinted at something deeper. Something fundamentally broken within him. The truth, known only to a select few, was far more complex and far more isolating. Asher Vance couldn't get it up for anyone. Not physically, not emotionally. His body, his heart, his very essence seemed locked away, unresponsive to intimacy, a cruel twist of fate for a man who commanded so much. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The man on the screen, the cold, powerful CEO, was the same man she had been treating for sensitive male issues. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow, stealing the air from her lungs. The meticulous web of deception, the fabricated medical history, the anonymous phone line, it all clicked into place, forming a picture that was both horrifying and deeply, profoundly hurtful. It wasn't a physical ailment in the conventional sense, no obvious medical diagnosis that could be neatly categorized and treated. It was a profound, almost psychological block, a wall that rose whenever intimacy beckoned, leaving him cold, detached, and utterly alone. He had sought the best specialists, discreetly, globally, therapists, endocrinologists, sexologists. All had offered theories, treatments, but nothing had worked. He was a prisoner in his own body, a king in a gilded cage, unable to experience the most fundamental human connection. She stumbled back, knocking over a small plant in the waiting room. The receptionist looked up, startled. Luna mumbled an apology, her face pale, and retreated to the small break room, her mind reeling. He had lied to her, manipulated her, used her compassion for some unknown purpose. The trust she had so freely given, the genuine empathy she had felt, now felt foolish, utterly misplaced. This unspoken issue was his deepest secret, his most profound shame. It fueled his relentless drive, his icy detachment. If he couldn't connect, he would conquer. If he couldn't feel, he would build. His coldness was a defense mechanism, a carefully constructed facade to hide the raw, vulnerable truth of his inability. He had learned to live with it, to accept it as an unchangeable part of his existence. He had resigned himself to a life of professional triumphs and personal solitude. Meanwhile, Elias Thorne's investigation was reaching its climax. Silas, his private investigator, had finally unearthed the crucial piece of information Elias had been waiting for. He had managed to obtain security footage from the alleyway behind Luna's clinic, showing Asher Vance, the CEO, discreetly entering and exiting the building at the exact times of his stress management appointments. The footage, though grainy, was undeniable. His assistant, a prim and efficient woman named Ms. Albright, knocked softly on his office door. "Mr. Vance, your 3 p.m. is here." Silas had also managed to get a hold of some of Luna's financial records, revealing the anonymous scholarship and the anonymous donation to Lily's hospital ward. Elias's cynical mind connected the dots with chilling speed. Asher wasn't just having a secret affair, he was paying off a vulnerable medical intern, perhaps to keep her quiet about a more embarrassing or even illicit secret. The condition was irrelevant. The deception, the vulnerability, was everything. Asher glanced at his watch. "Send them in." You see Elias, a triumphant, predatory gleam in his eyes, reviewing the evidence in his office. He had Asher. He had the proof he needed to expose his cousin, to shatter his reputation, and finally, to seize control of Vance Corp. He imagined the headlines, Vance Corp CEO's secret shame exploiting vulnerable intern for personal gain. It would be a scandal that would bring Asher Vance to his knees. He expected another corporate drone, another sycophant seeking investment or approval. He expected the usual deference, the polite distance. What he did not expect was the whirlwind that burst into his meticulously ordered world, a vibrant, slightly disheveled force of nature who would mistake him for someone utterly different, and in doing so, shatter the ice around his heart. He began to meticulously plan his attack. He would leak the information to a major news outlet, ensuring maximum impact. He would frame the narrative to portray Asher as a manipulative, unethical CEO who preyed on the vulnerable. He would use Luna, unknowingly, as the sympathetic victim, the innocent pawn in Asher's twisted game. He didn't care about Luna's feelings or the truth of Asher's condition. He cared only about power. And this was his moment to seize it. The door opened, and a young woman stepped in, carrying a large, worn canvas bag overflowing with what looked suspiciously like medical supplies. Her hair, a riot of fiery auburn curls, seemed to have a mind of its own, escaping its messy bun in rebellious tendrils. Her eyes, a startling shade of emerald green, were wide with a mix of determination and a hint of frantic energy. She wore sensible, slightly paint-splattered scrubs, and there was a smudge of something dark on her cheek. She looked utterly out of place in the opulent, sterile environment of his office. Luna, still reeling from her discovery, felt a profound sense of betrayal. She had poured her heart and soul into Mr. Vance, genuinely believing she was helping a man in need. She had shared her own vulnerabilities, her own struggles, with him. And he had been playing a cruel, elaborate game. The thought that he might have been laughing at her earnestness, at her bold misdiagnosis, was a bitter pill to swallow. Asher frowned. This was not his 3 p.m. His 3 p.m. was a Mr. Sterling from Apex Holdings. This was something else entirely. Her anger simmered, a slow, burning rage that threatened to consume her. She thought of Lily, of the sacrifices she had made, of the trust she had placed in him, the anonymous donations, the scholarship. They now felt like crumbs thrown to a dog, a way to keep her quiet, to ensure her compliance. She felt used, exploited, and utterly humiliated. The woman, Luna Hayes, a medical intern whose life was a perpetual juggling act of hospital shifts, studying, and caring for her ailing younger sister, didn't notice his frown. She was late, desperately late, and operating on 3 hours of sleep and a gallon of lukewarm coffee. She had received a garbled message from her supervisor about an urgent, highly sensitive home visit for a VIP patient who needed specialized discreet care. She'd assumed it was another one of those eccentric billionaires who thought their hangnail was a medical emergency. But her sister's mounting medical bills meant she couldn't afford to refuse. She considered confronting him, storming into his office and demanding answers. But her medical training, her logical mind, urged caution. She needed to understand why. Why had he done this? What was the true nature of his condition? And what did he truly want from her? The questions swirled in her mind, a chaotic maelstrom of confusion and hurt. She took one look at Asher, sitting rigidly behind his desk, his face pale, his jaw clenched, and immediately jumped to a conclusion. He looked stressed, terribly stressed. And she knew, from her limited but intense experience in the hospital, that stress could manifest in all sorts of sensitive ways. Asher, meanwhile, was preparing for his confession. He had decided that the next session would be the one. He would lay bare his soul, confess his deception, explain his past trauma, and reveal the true nature of his condition. He knew the risks. He knew he might lose her forever. But he couldn't live with the lie anymore. He couldn't live without the hope of a genuine connection with her. Mr. Vance, Luna asked, her voice surprisingly bold. Despite her internal panic about being late, she didn't wait for an answer. Okay, great. I'm Luna Hayes. Dr. Albright sent me. Said you needed an urgent consultation. Don't worry. I'm incredibly discreet. She strode confidently towards his desk, her eyes scanning him with a professional, yet intensely empathetic, gaze. He had no idea that Elias was already moving, like a viper striking from the shadows. He had no idea that the truth he was so carefully preparing to reveal was about to explode into the public sphere, not on his terms, but on his cousin's. The delicate web of deception, woven with such care, was about to be ripped apart, exposing Asher's deepest vulnerability and Luna's unwitting involvement to the harsh, unforgiving light of public scrutiny. The storm was coming, and neither Asher nor Luna were prepared for its devastating force. Asher stared at her, utterly bewildered. Dr. Albright, Ms. Albright was his assistant, and he certainly hadn't requested a consultation, urgent or otherwise. He opened his mouth to correct her, to dismiss her, to call security. But before he could utter a single word, Luna was already circling his desk. Her green eyes narrowed in a surprisingly astute assessment. The storm, long brewing in the shadows, finally broke with a devastating force. Asher Vance was preparing for his next session, steeling himself for the confession he knew he had to make, unaware that his carefully constructed world was about to explode. Luna Hayes, still reeling from her own discovery, was grappling with a profound sense of betrayal, her anger simmering just beneath the surface, and Elias Thorne, the predator, chose this precise moment to strike, ensuring maximum impact and public humiliation. You look tense, she observed, her voice dropping to a sympathetic murmur. Very tense and pale. Are you experiencing performance issues? You see Asher, dressed casually, waiting in his office for Luna's arrival. He had rehearsed his confession 100 times, trying to find the right words, the perfect tone to convey his genuine remorse and his profound love. He had even prepared a small and discreet gift for Lily, a gesture of his genuine desire to help Luna's sister, hoping it might soften Luna's inevitable anger. He was nervous, more nervous than he had ever been before a multi-billion-dollar deal. Asher froze. The air in the room, already cold, seemed to drop several degrees. His meticulously constructed wall of ice, which had repelled countless attempts at intimacy, now faced an assault from an entirely unexpected and utterly audacious angle. He, Asher Vance, the cold, unapproachable CEO, had just been asked by a complete stranger if he had erectile dysfunction, and the sheer, unbridled audacity of it, coupled with her genuine, if wildly mistaken, concern, left him speechless. Meanwhile, Luna was making her way to his office, her canvas bag feeling heavier than usual. Her mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The hurt was immense, the betrayal a bitter taste in her mouth, but beneath it, a tiny flicker of confusion remained. Why would a man like Asher Vance go to such lengths to deceive her? What was his true condition? Her medical instincts, despite her emotional turmoil, urged her to seek answers, to understand the full scope of his deception before she delivered her own verdict. Luna, misinterpreting his stunned silence for confirmation, nodded sagely. Right. I thought so. It's more common than you think, especially with high-stress individuals like yourself. Don't worry. Mr. Vance, you've come to the right place. I specialize in holistic approaches to these kinds of sensitive male issues. She then leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Sometimes, it's not just physical, it's emotional. Blockages, trauma, performance anxiety. But we can work through it. Together. Just as Luna stepped out of the elevator into the Vance Corp reception area, a cacophony erupted. Flashing cameras, shouting reporters, and a flurry of security guards suddenly filled the normally serene space. A large, garish banner unfurled, held by two aggressive-looking men, its bold red letters screaming, CEO Vance's secret shame exploiting vulnerable intern for personal gain. She then reached into her overflowing canvas bag, pulling out a small, oddly shaped device. Now, I know this looks a little unconventional, but it's a biofeedback stimulator. Helps with circulation, relaxes the nervous system. We'll start with some gentle exercises, some deep breathing, and then we can talk about the root cause. Luna froze, her eyes wide with horror. The words on the banner, the flashing lights, the aggressive shouts. It was a nightmare unfolding before her. And then, a familiar, sneering face appeared from the crowd. A microphone thrust into his hand. Elias Thorne. Asher watched her, utterly dumbfounded. His mind, usually sharp and decisive, was reeling. No one, absolutely no one, had ever spoken to him with such directness, such lack of deference, such boldness. And the fact that she had completely, utterly, mistaken him for a patient with that particular issue was so absurd, so far beyond anything he could have imagined, that a strange, unfamiliar sensation began to stir within him. It wasn't anger, it wasn't even annoyance, it was intrigue, a flicker of something he hadn't felt in years, curiosity. Ladies and gentlemen, Elias announced, his voice amplified by a portable speaker, a chillingly triumphant smirk on his face. I'm here today to expose the truth about Asher Vance, CEO of Vance Corp. For months, he has been secretly engaged in a deceptive relationship with a vulnerable medical intern, Luna Hayes, under the guise of stress management. He has exploited her compassion, manipulated her trust, and used his wealth to silence her about his personal issues. He, the unapproachable CEO, found himself unable to move, unable to speak, as this bold, slightly chaotic young woman, completely oblivious to his true identity, prepared to administer her holistic treatment. The wall of ice around his heart, which had resisted every attempt to breach it, now faced its most unexpected, and perhaps most dangerous, challenge yet. He, Asher Vance, was about to be cured by a girl who thought he couldn't get it up. And for some inexplicable reason, he found himself wanting to see what would happen next. He then held up a grainy photo, clearly taken from Silas's security footage, Asher entering Luna's clinic. This is Asher Vance, entering a rundown clinic. Not for business, but for a secret, embarrassing medical condition. And this is the young woman he has been paying off to keep his secrets. He then produced a printout of Luna's financial records, highlighting the anonymous scholarship and hospital donation. He has used his wealth to control her, to ensure her complicity in his charade. Asher Vance, the man who commanded boardrooms with a single glance, who could dismantle a competitor with a well-placed word, found himself utterly disarmed. Luna Hayes, still oblivious to his true identity, had already pulled a small, portable examination light from her bag, her fiery curls bouncing as she adjusted its angle. She was humming a cheerful, slightly off-key tune, completely at ease in his intimidating office, a stark contrast to the nervous, deferential executives he usually encountered. Luna felt the blood drain from her face. The cameras, once focused on Elias, now swiveled towards her, their flashes blinding. Reporters surged forward, microphones thrust into her face, shouting questions. Are you Luna Hayes? Is it true you were Asher Vance's secret mistress? Did he pay you off? All right, Mr. Vance, she chirped, her green eyes sparkling with an almost childlike earnestness. Let's get you comfortable. This isn't going to hurt a bit, but it might feel a little tingly. She gestured vaguely towards his chair, then to the biofeedback stimulator, which looked suspiciously like a modified massage device. The humiliation was immediate, raw, and public. Her entire world, her reputation, her hard-won independence were being shredded before her eyes. She was no longer Luna Hayes, the compassionate intern, the aspiring doctor. She was the vulnerable intern, the secret mistress, a pawn in a corporate scandal. The betrayal, already a deep wound, now festered with the added sting of public disgrace. Asher's mind, usually a fortress of logic and control, was in a state of unprecedented chaos. Every instinct screamed at him to stop her, to reveal his identity, to summon security and have her escorted from the premises. But a strange, almost magnetic pull held him captive. Her audacity, her genuine concern, her complete lack of fear in his presence, it was all so utterly foreign, so refreshingly uncalculated, that he found himself intrigued. He, the man who couldn't get it up for anyone, was experiencing a flicker of something akin to amusement, a sensation so rare it felt almost alien. Meanwhile, inside his office, Asher heard the commotion, the shouts, the flashes of light penetrating his tinted windows. His heart plummeted. Elias. He knew it. He had underestimated his cousin's ruthlessness, his timing. He rushed to the window, peering down, and saw the chaotic scene below. He saw Luna, her face pale, surrounded by a mob of reporters. And he saw Elias, a triumphant, predatory gleam in his eyes. He watched, mesmerized. As Luna approached his desk, she didn't hesitate, didn't falter. She simply leaned over, her face close to his, her scent a clean, fresh aroma of antiseptic and something faintly floral, a stark contrast to the heavy, expensive perfumes of the women he usually encountered. A cold, burning rage ignited within Asher. Elias hadn't just exposed his secret, he had dragged Luna into it, publicly humiliated her, and twisted their fragile, genuine connection into something sordid and exploitative. This wasn't just an attack on him. It was an attack on the only person who had ever truly touched his heart. Now, deep breaths, she instructed, her voice soft but firm, in through the nose, out through the mouth. Imagine you're blowing out a candle. Relax your shoulders. You're holding a lot of tension there. Mr. Vance, that's probably half the problem. He grabbed his phone, his fingers flying. Ms. Albright, get security down there immediately. Clear the building and get my car ready. Now, Asher, against his own will, found himself taking a deep breath. He felt the tension in his shoulders, a constant knot he hadn't even realized was there, begin to loosen, infinitesimally. He stared into her emerald eyes, which held no judgment, only a pure, unadulterated desire to help. It was unnerving and, strangely, comforting. He then called his head of legal, Mr. Davies. Elias Thorne is making a public spectacle at the entrance. He's slandering Luna Hayes and making false accusations about Vance Corp. I want a defamation lawsuit filed against him immediately. And I want a restraining order against him. Now his voice was a low, dangerous growl, filled with a fury his team had rarely witnessed. Luna then, with a surprising amount of strength, pushed his executive chair back from the desk, creating more space. Okay, now, if you could just lean back a little. We need to get this device working its magic. She held up the biofeedback stimulator, its small lights blinking. Asher stormed out of his office, Miss Albright scrambling to keep up. He took the private elevator directly to the ground floor, bypassing the chaos. When the doors opened, he pushed through the security guards, his eyes fixed on Luna. She was trembling, her face tear-streaked, overwhelmed by the onslaught of questions and flashing lights. He leaned back, his body stiff, his mind still reeling. He was Asher Vance, CEO of Vance Corp. He did not take orders from medical interns who thought he had erectile dysfunction. And yet, here he was, complying. The absurdity of the situation was almost comical, and a faint, almost imperceptible tremor of a smile touched the corners of his lips. Luna Asher's voice cut through the din, sharp and authoritative. He pushed through the crowd, ignoring the shouts of the reporters. His gaze locked on her. He reached her, pulling her protectively behind him, shielding her from the cameras. Luna, busy adjusting the device, didn't notice. She pressed a few buttons, and the stimulator emitted a low hum. "All right, Mr. Vance, this might feel a little odd at first. Just try to focus on your breathing. Imagine all that stress, all that tension, just melting away." Elias, seeing Asher's unexpected appearance, smirked. "Ah, Asher. Just in time for the grand reveal. Come, tell the world about your little secret, your condition." She placed the device against his lower back, then moved it to his shoulders, then, with a surprising amount of confidence, to his temples. The vibrations were gentle, a soothing hum that seemed to penetrate the layers of his chronic tension. He felt a warmth spread through his muscles, a subtle relaxation he hadn't experienced in years. Asher ignored Elias, his eyes fixed on Luna. Her emerald eyes, once filled with warmth and empathy, now held a profound, raw hurt and a flicker of anger. The betrayal was clear in her gaze. He knew this was it. The moment of truth, forced upon them by Elias's cruel machinations. Luna continued to talk, her voice a steady, comforting murmur. She spoke of the importance of stress management, of holistic well-being, of connecting with one's inner self. She spoke of her own experiences with stress, of the pressures of medical school and caring for her sister. She was open, honest, and utterly without pretense. She was everything he was not. "Luna," Asher said, his voice low, filled with a desperate sincerity, I know what this looks like. I know you're hurt, and I deserve it. But please, let me explain everything." He reached for her hand, but she flinched away, her trust shattered. Asher listened, truly listened, for the first time in what felt like an eternity. He wasn't listening to a business proposal, or a financial report, or a sycophantic plea. He was listening to a human being, speaking from the heart, with genuine concern. Her voice, slightly raspy from lack of sleep, held a melodic quality, a warmth that seemed to chip away at the ice around his own. "Explain." Luna's voice was a raw whisper, barely audible over the clamor of the reporters. "Explain why you lied to me, why you manipulated me, why you used my compassion for whatever this is." She gestured wildly at the chaotic scene around them. "You let me believe I was helping a patient, Mr. Vance, while you were Asher Vance, the CEO, the man who owns half the city." "You know," Luna said, her voice dropping to a thoughtful tone as she moved the device to his neck, "a lot of my patients, especially the high achievers, they bottle everything up. They think showing any weakness is a failure. But it's not. It's human. And sometimes those emotional blockages, they manifest physically, like, well, like what you're experiencing." She paused, then added, with a gentle, empathetic smile, "It's okay to not be okay. Mr. Vance." Asher flinched at her words, the pain in her voice a physical blow. He saw the depth of her hurt, the profound sense of betrayal. He knew, in that moment, that Elias had succeeded in his immediate goal. He had shattered Luna's trust, and potentially Asher's last chance with her. The words, so simple, so direct, struck Asher with the force of a physical blow. It's okay to not be okay. No one had ever said that to him, not his parents, who had instilled in him a relentless drive for perfection, not his mentors, who had taught him to suppress all emotion in the pursuit of success, not the parade of women who had tried to penetrate his defenses and failed. Luna, a complete stranger, had seen through his facade, not to judge, but to offer comfort. Elias, seeing his opportunity, stepped forward, a triumphant smile on his face. "There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. The truth from the victim's own mouth. Asher Vance, a man who will stop at nothing, not even exploiting the vulnerable, to hide his personal issues and maintain his image." He felt a strange tightening in his chest, an unfamiliar warmth spreading through him. It wasn't physical. It was emotional. A profound sense of being seen, truly seen, for the first time. The wall around his heart, which had resisted every attempt at intimacy, now felt a subtle tremor, a hairline crack appearing in its icy surface. Asher's eyes, usually cold and calculating, now blazed with a raw, protective fury. He turned to Elias, his voice a low, dangerous growl that cut through the noise. "You will regret this, Elias. You have no idea what you've just unleashed." He still hadn't corrected her, He still hadn't told her who he was, and a part of him, a part he hadn't known existed, didn't want to. He wanted to see how far this strange, unexpected journey would go. He wanted to feel the warmth of her genuine concern, her unwavering empathy, for just a little longer. He then turned back to Luna, his gaze pleading, "Luna, please! I know I messed up. I know I lied. But my feelings for you, they're real. More real than anything I've ever felt. Please, just give me a chance to explain. Not here. Not like this." Luna, satisfied with her treatment, finally turned off the stimulator. "All right, Mr. Vance, that's a good start. I think we're making progress. But this isn't a one-time fix. We'll need regular sessions. And some homework for you. Try to incorporate some mindfulness exercises. Maybe a little light stretching. And definitely more sleep." She looked at him, her green eyes serious. "Your well-being is important, Mr. Vance. Don't neglect it." But Luna, overwhelmed by the public humiliation, the betrayal, and the sheer chaos of the moment, shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I can't. Mr. Vance, I can't. Not now." She pulled away from him, pushing through the reporters, her head bowed. Desperate to escape the blinding flashes and the cruel questions, she began to pack up her bag, her movements quick and efficient. Asher watched her, a silent observer in his own office. He was Asher Vance, the cold, unapproachable CEO, and he had just allowed a bold, slightly chaotic medical intern to give him a biofeedback treatment for a condition he didn't have, all while dispensing life advice he desperately needed. The absurdity of it all was still present, but now it was tinged with a strange, undeniable sense of hope. Asher watched her go, his heart a raw, bleeding wound. He had lost her, and Elias, his own cousin, had orchestrated it. The panic was no longer about his company or his reputation. It was about the profound, agonizing loss of the only woman who had ever managed to thaw his frozen heart. The storm had broken, and Asher Vance was left standing in its devastating wake, utterly alone, facing the full, agonizing consequences of his deception and his cousin's ruthless betrayal. "Dr. Albright will schedule your next appointment," Luna said, slinging her canvas bag over her shoulder. "And remember, discretion is key. Your secret is safe with me, Mr. Vance." She gave him a cheerful, knowing wink. And then, with a final, confident nod, she walked out of his office, leaving Asher Vance alone in the sudden, profound silence. The blinding flashes of the cameras, the aggressive shouts of the reporters, and Elias Thorne's sneering pronouncements echoed in Luna Hayes' mind long after she fled the chaotic scene at Vance Corp. Her heart, already raw from the discovery of Asher's deception, now felt utterly shredded, bleeding with the fresh wounds of public humiliation and profound betrayal. She had been a pawn, an unwitting participant in a cruel game, and the realization was a bitter, agonizing pill to swallow. He sat there for a long moment, the faint scent of antiseptic and flowers lingering in the air. His shoulders felt lighter, his mind clearer, and for the first time in years, Asher Vance felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in a long, long time. Not just intrigue, but a profound, undeniable curiosity about the bold, compassionate girl who had mistaken him for a patient. He knew he should correct her, he knew he should end this charade, but for some inexplicable reason, he found himself wanting to see what would happen next. He wanted more of Luna Hayes. He wanted more of this unfamiliar warmth. You see Luna, not in her small, cozy apartment, but holed up in her sister Lily's hospital room. The sterile white walls a stark contrast to the vibrant chaos of her inner world. She had rushed there, seeking refuge, the only place she felt truly safe. Lily, frail but perceptive, had immediately sensed her sister's distress, her small hand reaching out to grasp Luna's. That simple touch was the only thing grounding Luna in a reality that had suddenly become a nightmare. The door to Asher Vance's office clicked shut, leaving him in a profound silence that now felt less empty and more expectant. The faint scent of antiseptic and flowers, Luna's unique aroma, lingered in the air, a tangible reminder of the whirlwind that had just swept through his meticulously ordered world. He sat there for a long moment, the biofeedback stimulator still warm in his hand, his mind replaying every bold word, every empathetic glance from Luna Hayes. "Luna, what happened?" "Your face, you're crying," Lily whispered, her voice weak but filled with concern. He, Asher Vance, the man who had built an empire on logic and control, had just been utterly blindsided. And for the first time in years, he felt a flicker of something beyond professional ambition or personal detachment. It was a sensation he couldn't quite name, a subtle warmth spreading through his chest, a lightness in his usually burdened shoulders. It was unsettling and profoundly intriguing. Luna couldn't speak. The words were choked in her throat, caught between a wave of nausea and a surge of furious tears. She just shook her head, burying her face in Lily's blanket, the rough fabric a small comfort against her burning cheeks. She felt foolish, utterly and completely foolish. She had poured her heart and soul into Mr. Vance, genuinely believing she was helping a man in need. She had shared her own vulnerabilities, her own struggles, with him. And he had been playing a cruel, elaborate game, using her compassion as a shield for his own secrets. He knew, logically, that he should have corrected her. He should have ended the absurd charade immediately. But a powerful, almost primal curiosity had held him back. Luna's genuine concern, her complete lack of deference, her utterly uncalculated approach. It was a stark contrast to the carefully curated interactions that defined his life. Every woman he had ever met, every business associate, every acquaintance, had approached him with an agenda, a hidden motive, or at the very least, a palpable sense of awe or fear. Luna had approached him with a biofeedback stimulator and a diagnosis for a condition he didn't have. And she had seen him, truly seen him, in a way no one ever had. The anonymous scholarship, the hospital donation for Lily. They no longer felt like acts of kindness. They felt like bribes, carefully calculated payments to ensure her silence, her complicity. He had used her sister's illness, to maintain his charade. The thought was a fresh stab of pain, twisting the knife deeper into her already wounded heart. His condition, the deep-seated emotional block that rendered him incapable of intimacy, had been a source of profound shame and isolation. He had resigned himself to it, built walls around his heart so thick that he believed nothing could penetrate them. Yet, Luna, with her bold misdiagnosis and her simple, empathetic words, "It's okay to not be okay," had managed to chip away at that ice, leaving a hairline crack where warmth could seep in. Her phone, which she had silenced, vibrated relentlessly in her bag. She knew it was Asher. His desperate pleas, his attempts to explain, they meant nothing. His words at the entrance, "My feelings for you, they're real," now sounded like the most hollow of lies. Another carefully crafted manipulation. How could anything be real when it was built on such a foundation of deceit? The thought of her fiery curls, her direct green eyes, her slightly off-key humming, stayed with him throughout the day. He found himself distracted, his focus wavering during meetings, his mind drifting back to the absurd encounter. He caught himself smiling, a rare, almost forgotten expression, at the memory of her confident pronouncements about emotional blockages. She refused to answer his calls, his texts. She blocked his number, his email. She wanted him out of her life, completely, utterly. The bridge between them, which she had once believed was forming, was now not just burned, but obliterated, reduced to ashes by the fire of his betrayal and Elias's ruthless exposure. He knew he needed to see her again, not just to satisfy his curiosity, but because he felt something, a pull, an undeniable draw to her unique energy. But how he couldn't simply call her and admit the truth, that would shatter the fragile, intriguing dynamic they had established. He needed to maintain the illusion, at least for a little while longer. The next few days were a blur of pain and self-recrimination. Luna called her supervisor at the clinic, offering a vague explanation about a personal emergency and requesting a temporary leave of absence. She couldn't face going back, couldn't face the inevitable whispers, the knowing glances, the questions from colleagues who had seen the news. Her reputation, meticulously built on hard work and integrity, felt shattered. This was where Asher Vance, the master strategist, came into play. He might be lost in matters of the heart, but in orchestrating a situation, he was unparalleled. He called Ms. Albright. She spent her time by Lily's bedside, finding solace in the simple act of caring for her sister. She read to Lily, helped her with her meals, and simply was present. It was a way to channel her overwhelming emotions, to focus on something pure and undeniable. Lily's innocent trust was a stark contrast to Asher's calculated deception, a reminder of what truly mattered. "Ms. Albright," he said, his voice as calm and authoritative as ever, betraying none of his internal turmoil. "I had a rather unusual visitor this afternoon. A medical intern, Luna Hayes. Her friends, hearing the news, rallied around her. They brought her food, offered comfort, and listened patiently as Luna, in choked whispers, recounted the story. They expressed outrage on her behalf, condemning Asher's actions and Elias's cruelty. Their unwavering support was a lifeline, pulling her back from the brink of despair." Ms. Albright's voice was crisp. Yes, Mr. Vance. My apologies. There was a mix-up with a scheduling error. A Dr. Albright from the hospital had requested a discreet home visit for a patient with a similar name, and my assistant mistakenly routed the call here. I've already rectified the error. He's a monster. Luna, her best friend, Maya, declared, her eyes blazing with indignation. He used you. He used your kindness. You deserve so much better. No, Asher interrupted, his voice firm. Don't rectify it. I found her insights surprisingly refreshing. I'd like to continue her treatment discreetly. Of course, for my stress management, he emphasized the words, making it clear he wanted no questions asked. Luna nodded, the words echoing her own thoughts. She felt a profound sense of shame, a burning humiliation that she had been so naive, so trusting. She had allowed herself to be drawn into his world, to believe in his vulnerability, to open her heart to a man who was nothing but a master manipulator. Ms. Albright, ever professional, didn't bat an eye. Understood. Mr. Vance, I will arrange for regular stress management sessions with Ms. Hayes. What frequency would you prefer? She began to process the anger, letting it fuel her resolve. She would not let this break her. She would not let Asher Vance or Elias Thorne define her. She would pick up the pieces of her shattered life, and she would rebuild, stronger and wiser than before. She would focus on Lily, on her medical studies, on her dreams. She would never again let herself be so vulnerable, so trusting. Asher paused. He wanted to see her every day, but that would be too obvious, too suspicious. Twice a week, he decided, and ensure complete discretion. No one is to know about these sessions. The thought of Asher, of his desperate pleas, his attempts to explain, still brought a pang of pain. But it was no longer a pain of longing. It was a pain of disgust, of disappointment. She had seen the raw, protective fury in his eyes when he confronted Elias, the desperate sincerity in his voice when he spoke to her. A part of her, a very small, wounded part, wondered if his feelings were real, if his love was genuine. But the deception, the public humiliation, the sheer audacity of his lie, it was too much. The foundation of trust was utterly destroyed. Of course, Mr. Vance, Miss, Albright replied. Consider it handled. She vowed to herself that she would never look back. She would focus on her future, on building a life where her compassion would be valued, not exploited. She would heal, not just from the public scandal, but from the deep wound of betrayal. She would prove to herself and to the world that she was more than just the vulnerable intern caught in a CEO's scandal. She was Luna Hayes, a woman of strength, resilience, and unwavering integrity. And so, the elaborate web of deception began to weave itself. Asher, the cold CEO, became Mr. Vance, the patient with sensitive male issues. To Luna, he used his vast resources to ensure their continued encounters, orchestrating a fabricated medical history to maintain the illusion. He even had Ms. Albright create a fake, generic medical clinic email address for Luna to send her patient updates to, ensuring no direct contact that might expose him. Asher, meanwhile, was left reeling from Luna's rejection. He had seen the raw hurt in her eyes, the profound sense of betrayal. He knew, in that moment, that he had lost her, and the realization was a crushing blow, far more devastating than any corporate crisis. He had finally opened his heart, finally allowed himself to feel, only to have that love rejected, shattered by his own deception. He was left with the agonizing consequences of his actions, facing a future that felt colder and emptier than ever before. The panic was no longer about his company or his reputation. It was about the profound, agonizing loss of the only woman who had ever managed to thaw his frozen heart. He was truly alone, facing the long, arduous road of reckoning, with no guarantee of redemption. Luna, meanwhile, remained utterly oblivious. She was simply grateful for the opportunity. The Mr. Vance patient, despite his obvious wealth and intimidating aura, was surprisingly compliant and, in his own way, vulnerable. He listened to her, truly listened, and seemed genuinely interested in her holistic approach. His condition, she theorized, was deeply rooted in stress and emotional repression, common among high-powered executives. She believed she was genuinely helping him. The public humiliation, Luna's raw pain, and her unequivocal rejection had struck Asher Vance with a force far more devastating than any corporate crisis. He had faced the full, agonizing consequences of his deception, and the profound, agonizing loss of the only woman who had ever managed to thaw his frozen heart. But Asher Vance, for all his flaws, was not a man who easily gave up. He had lost Luna, yes, but the love he felt for her, a love so new and terrifyingly real, fueled a desperate, almost reckless, fight to win her back. You see Luna diligently researching alternative therapies, poring over medical texts, and even experimenting with new biofeedback techniques. She spent hours preparing for each session, genuinely invested in her mysterious patient's well-being. She saw him not as a cold CEO, but as a man burdened by immense pressure, struggling with a sensitive issue he was too proud to admit. Her compassion for him deepened with each encounter. You see Asher, not in his pristine office, but in a whirlwind of activity. His cold, calculating mind now entirely focused on a single, impossible goal: redemption. He knew Luna's trust was shattered, her heart bleeding from his lie and Elias's cruel exposure. He knew the odds were stacked against him. But for the first time in his life, he wasn't fighting for power or profit. He was fighting for love, for a chance at genuine connection. During their sessions, Asher found himself opening up to Luna in ways he never had with anyone. He spoke of his relentless drive, the crushing weight of expectations, the loneliness at the top. He didn't reveal the true nature of his condition, but he spoke of the emotional distance he felt, the inability to connect, the profound sense of isolation. Luna, interpreting this through her medical lens, saw it as symptoms of his emotional blockages and offered empathetic advice, mindfulness exercises, and even guided meditations. His first step was to publicly address the scandal. He couldn't let Elias's fabricated narrative stand. He held an impromptu press conference, not in the grand ballroom of Vance Corp, but in a more intimate setting, away from the usual corporate fanfare. He stood before the cameras, his face grim, his eyes holding a raw sincerity that startled the seasoned reporters. He found himself looking forward to their appointments with an eagerness that startled him. Her presence was a balm to his perpetually stressed mind, a splash of vibrant color in his monochrome world. Her laughter, free and uninhibited, was a melody he hadn't realized he missed. He found himself subtly testing her, dropping hints about his real life, his real power, just to see if she would react, if her genuine nature would crack. But Luna remained steadfast, her focus solely on him, the patient. "I am here today," Asher began, his voice steady, though a tremor of vulnerability ran beneath it, "to address the recent allegations made against me and Vance Corp. The claims of corporate misconduct are entirely false and are being dealt with legally." He paused, then took a deep breath. "However, the personal allegations, particularly concerning Ms. Luna Hayes, I owe Ms. Hayes and the public the truth." One afternoon, during a session, Luna brought up the topic of family. "You know, Mr. Vance," she said, her voice gentle, "sometimes these blockages stem from unresolved family issues, past traumas. Did you have a close relationship with your parents?" He then, with a humility that shocked even his closest advisors, confessed to his deception. He didn't offer excuses. He explained his long-standing, deeply personal struggle with intimacy, his inability to form genuine connections, and how Luna, unknowingly, had been the first person to ever break through his emotional walls. He admitted to the lie, to the manipulation, and expressed his profound regret for the pain he had caused Luna. He acknowledged the anonymous scholarship and donation to Lily's hospital, not as bribes, but as genuine attempts to help a woman he had come to deeply care for. Asher stiffened. His past was a carefully guarded vault, locked away behind layers of ice. He had never spoken of it to anyone. But Luna's green eyes, so open and empathetic, seemed to invite honesty. He found himself, to his own astonishment, speaking of his demanding, emotionally distant father, his perfectionist mother, the relentless pressure to excel, to be flawless. He spoke of a childhood devoid of warmth, where affection was conditional on achievement. "My actions were born of fear," Asher stated, his voice raw with emotion. Fear of vulnerability, fear of rejection, fear of losing the only person who ever saw past my facade. "I deeply regret the pain I caused Ms. Hayes. She is a woman of incredible integrity and compassion, and she deserves nothing but the truth and my sincerest apology." He didn't mention his love for her publicly, knowing it would only add to Luna's distress. But his eyes, fixed on the cameras, conveyed a silent, desperate plea. It was a corporate mea culpa, but with a deeply personal, almost agonizing core. Luna listened intently, nodding, her hand gently resting on his arm, a touch that sent a jolt through him, a warmth he hadn't felt in years. "It sounds like you built a lot of walls, Mr. Vance," she murmured, "to protect yourself. But sometimes, those walls, they keep out the good things too." The press conference sent shockwaves through the media. The cold, unapproachable CEO had shown vulnerability, admitted a profound personal struggle, and publicly apologized. It was unprecedented. While some remained skeptical, many were intrigued, and a few even expressed a grudging respect for his honesty. The words resonated with a profound truth. He had built walls, yes, to protect himself from the pain of emotional vulnerability. But those walls had also imprisoned him, cutting him off from the very intimacy he craved, yet was incapable of experiencing. Luna, unknowingly, was dismantling those walls, brick by painstaking brick, with her unwavering compassion and her audacious honesty. Meanwhile, Elias Thorne, watching the press conference from his office, was furious. Asher had stolen his thunder, turned the narrative on its head. He had expected Asher to deny everything, to fight dirty. He had not expected this raw, public confession. Elias knew he had to strike harder and faster before public opinion could fully shift. He still hadn't gotten it up in the way Luna mistakenly thought he needed to, but something far more profound was stirring within him. His heart, once a frozen wasteland, was beginning to thaw. He was feeling things he hadn't felt in years: genuine connection, vulnerability, and a profound, undeniable attraction to the bold, compassionate girl who had mistaken him for a patient. The deception was a dangerous game, he knew, but for the first time in his life, Asher Vance was willing to risk everything for a chance at true warmth. He launched an intensified attack on Vance Corp, attempting a hostile takeover, leveraging the initial dip in stock prices and spreading rumors of Asher's instability. He used his connections to leak more damaging, fabricated stories about Asher's past business dealings, trying to paint him as ruthless and unethical. He even tried to turn Asher's own board members against him, suggesting that Asher's personal issues made him unfit to lead a multi-billion-dollar corporation. The twice-weekly stress management sessions became the unexpected anchors in Asher Vance's meticulously ordered, yet emotionally barren, life. He found himself looking forward to them with an eagerness that bordered on obsession, a stark contrast to his usual indifference towards anything that didn't directly impact Vance Corp's bottom line. Luna Hayes, still utterly oblivious to his true identity, continued to dismantle his carefully constructed walls, brick by painstaking brick, with her unwavering compassion and her audacious honesty. You see Asher, now fighting a war on two fronts. Professionally, he was battling Elias's relentless attacks, working tirelessly to stabilize Vance Corp, reassuring investors, and rallying his loyal team. Personally, he was battling for Luna's forgiveness, sending her daily heartfelt letters through Ms. Reed, pouring out his heart, explaining his past, and expressing the depth of his love. Each letter was a desperate plea, a raw confession, a testament to his genuine remorse. He didn't expect a response. He just needed her to know. You see Asher, no longer stiff and guarded, but leaning back in his executive chair, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips as Luna, humming softly, applied her biofeedback stimulator. The vibrations were soothing, but it was her presence, her direct gaze, her genuine questions that truly worked their magic. He found himself sharing more and more, not just about his stress, but about the deeper anxieties that plagued him, the crushing weight of his father's legacy, the relentless pressure to maintain his empire, the profound loneliness that came with being at the top. Luna, meanwhile, was slowly, painfully processing everything. She had seen Asher's press conference, watched his raw confession with a mixture of shock and a strange, unfamiliar pang in her heart. His vulnerability, so public, so unexpected, had chipped away at some of her anger. The letters, delivered by Ms. Reed, were harder to dismiss. Each word was a testament to his pain, his regret, his profound love. She still felt betrayed. Yes, but a tiny, wounded part of her began to wonder if his feelings were real, if his love was genuine. Luna, interpreting everything through her medical lens, saw these as classic symptoms of a high-stress, emotionally repressed individual. She offered practical advice, mindfulness exercises, dietary suggestions, even a recommendation to get a pet for emotional support. Asher, who had always dismissed such soft approaches, found himself surprisingly receptive. He even considered the pet idea, a ridiculous thought for a man who barely had time to sleep. She read about his difficult childhood, his emotionally distant parents, the relentless pressure that had shaped him into the cold, guarded man she had initially encountered. She read about his lifelong struggle with intimacy, the condition that had rendered him unable to connect. She began to see the depth of his pain, the profound loneliness that had driven his deception. She saw him not just as a manipulative CEO, but as a deeply wounded man, desperate for connection. His condition, the one Luna believed she was treating, remained unchanged in its physical manifestation. He still couldn't get it up for anyone, but the emotional landscape within him was shifting dramatically. He found himself feeling things he hadn't felt in years, genuine warmth, a burgeoning sense of connection, and a powerful, undeniable attraction to Luna. This attraction was unlike anything he had ever experienced. It wasn't superficial, driven by physical desire or social expectation. It was a deep, visceral pull to her spirit, her kindness, her raw authenticity. It was like discovering a hidden spring in a desert and realizing it's the only water you've ever truly craved. Her medical instincts, which had initially led her to misdiagnose him, now urged her to understand the root cause of his emotional block. Could his condition truly be a psychological manifestation of deep-seated trauma? Could her treatment, however mistaken, have genuinely begun to thaw his frozen heart? The thought was both terrifying and profoundly intriguing. He found himself subtly testing her, dropping hints about his real life, his real power, just to see if she would react, if her genuine nature would crack under the weight of his status. He'd casually mention a private jet trip or a multi-million-dollar deal he'd just closed. Luna would nod, her eyes focused on his perceived stress levels, offering a sympathetic, "That sounds like a lot of pressure. Mr. Vance, remember to breathe." Her unwavering focus on him, the patient rather than him, the CEO, was both frustrating and incredibly endearing. She still refused to meet him, to speak to him directly. The public humiliation, the initial betrayal, they were too raw, too painful. But she found herself rereading his letters, late at night, her heart aching with a complex mix of anger, hurt, and a burgeoning sense of compassion. One afternoon, during a session, Asher found himself speaking about his childhood, a topic he had never, ever discussed with anyone. He spoke of his demanding, emotionally distant father, a man who saw affection as weakness and achievement as the only measure of worth. He spoke of his perfectionist mother, who had instilled in him an unrelenting drive to excel, to be flawless. He recounted a childhood devoid of warmth, where every success was met with a nod, never a hug, and every failure with a cold, disapproving silence. Asher, meanwhile, was fighting for his empire. Elias's attacks were relentless, but Asher, now fueled by a purpose beyond mere ambition, fought back with a ferocity that surprised even his most seasoned rivals. He leveraged his genuine connections, his long-standing reputation for integrity despite the recent scandal, and his undeniable strategic brilliance, he exposed Elias's own manipulative tactics, his history of corporate sabotage, and his ruthless ambition. Luna listened intently, her hand gently resting on his arm, a touch that sent a jolt through him, a warmth he hadn't felt in years. "It sounds like you built a lot of walls, Mr. Vance," she murmured, her voice soft with empathy. "To protect yourself? To survive? But sometimes, those walls, they keep out the good things too. They keep out connection. They keep out love." You see Asher, his face tired but resolute, rallying his team, inspiring loyalty through his newfound honesty and vulnerability. He was no longer just a CEO. He was a man fighting for his legacy, for his company, and for the chance to prove himself worthy of the love he had found. The battle was far from over, but Asher Vance, once the cold, unfeeling titan, was now fighting with a heart that, though broken, was finally, irrevocably, alive. The words resonated with a profound truth. He had built walls. Yes, to protect himself from the pain of emotional vulnerability. But those walls had also imprisoned him, cutting him off from the very intimacy he craved, yet was incapable of experiencing. Luna, unknowingly, was dismantling those walls, brick by painstaking brick, with her unwavering compassion and her audacious honesty. Asher Vance's public confession, a desperate gamble for redemption and Luna's forgiveness, had indeed shifted the narrative, but it had also painted a giant target on his back. Elias Thorne, watching his cousin's unprecedented vulnerability, saw not a sign of strength, but the ultimate weakness to exploit. This was his moment. He would not just strike, he would launch a full-scale, vicious assault on Vance Corp, aiming to dismantle Asher's empire and ruin his reputation beyond repair. He found himself wanting to confess, to reveal everything, to tell her he wasn't just Mr. Vance, the patient, but Asher Vance, the CEO of Vance Corp, the man whose condition was far more complex than she imagined. He wanted to tell her that she, a bold, slightly chaotic medical intern, had managed to touch his heart in a way no one ever had. But the fear of shattering the fragile connection, of seeing her genuine concern turn to anger or disgust, held him back. The deception was a dangerous game, he knew, but for the first time in his life, Asher Vance was willing to risk everything for a chance at true warmth, a chance to feel. You see Elias, his eyes gleaming with a cold, triumphant malice, sitting in his office, surrounded by a team of lawyers and financial analysts. He was no longer content with subtle leaks or veiled threats. Asher's confession, while earning him some public sympathy, had also confirmed his personal issues Elias could now spin as a profound instability, a dangerous liability for a CEO of a multi-billion-dollar corporation. It was like a chess grandmaster seeing his opponent's king exposed, knowing exactly how to deliver the checkmate. Meanwhile, Asher's inner circle, particularly Ms. Albright, his assistant, and his chief of staff, Mr. Davies, began to notice subtle shifts in his demeanor. He was still demanding, still brilliant, but there was a new, almost imperceptible lightness about him. He occasionally smiled during meetings, a genuine curve of his lips that startled his team. He was less prone to sudden bursts of cold anger, more receptive to feedback. They attributed it to his stress management sessions, a vague explanation that satisfied their professional curiosity. He's admitted to a personal struggle with intimacy. Elias sneered, gesturing at a news report on his large screen. He's confessed to a deception involving a vulnerable intern. This isn't just a scandal, it's proof of a fragile, unstable mind. We will use this to portray him as unfit to lead, a liability to our shareholders. What they didn't know was the depth of the emotional awakening Luna was triggering within him. He started to observe the world differently, seeing the small acts of kindness, the genuine connections between people, the vibrant tapestry of life he had always been too detached to notice. He found himself watching Luna during their sessions, mesmerized by her passion, her dedication, her unwavering belief in helping others. He saw the subtle signs of her own struggles, the faint shadows under her eyes from long shifts, the occasional tired slump of her shoulders, and a fierce, protective instinct, entirely new to him, began to stir within his chest. His plan was meticulously crafted, leveraging every piece of information Silas had gathered, twisting every truth into a damning lie. First, he initiated a hostile takeover bid for Vance Corp, making a public offer just below market value. Designed to create panic and undervalue the company, he then began to spread rumors through his extensive network of contacts, suggesting that Asher's recent personal issues had led to erratic decision-making, undisclosed financial risks, and a general decline in his leadership capabilities. He found himself wanting to help her, to ease her burdens, to make her life a little easier. He discreetly had Ms. Albright look into Luna's background, not out of suspicion, but out of a genuine desire to understand her world. He learned about her younger sister, Lily, who suffered from a rare, chronic illness that required expensive treatments. He learned about Luna's relentless work ethic, her sacrifices, her unwavering devotion to her family. The information only deepened his admiration and his burgeoning affection for her. You hear the whispers echoing through the financial districts, amplified by Elias's carefully placed articles in obscure but influential business journals. Is Asher Vance losing his touch? Concerns mount over Vance Corp's leadership stability. Sources close to the board suggest CEO Vance is under immense personal strain. These were not direct accusations, but insidious suggestions, designed to erode investor confidence and create a climate of fear. The emotional block that had rendered him incapable of intimacy was still there, a formidable wall. But Luna was chipping away at it, not with grand gestures or calculated seduction, but with simple, unadulterated kindness and genuine empathy. He hadn't gotten it up in the way Luna mistakenly thought he needed to, but something far more profound was stirring within him. His heart, once a frozen wasteland, was beginning to thaw. He was feeling things he hadn't felt in years: genuine connection, vulnerability, and a profound, undeniable attraction to the bold, compassionate girl who had mistaken him for a patient. The deception was a dangerous game. He knew, but for the first time in his life, Asher Vance was willing to risk everything for a chance at true warmth. Elias also resurrected old, minor controversies from Asher's past business dealings, twisting them into fabricated scandals. He leaked documents related to aggressive acquisition tactics from years ago, presenting them as evidence of unethical practices. He dug up old, dismissed lawsuits, reframing them as ongoing legal threats. He even paid off disgruntled former employees to give anonymous interviews, painting a picture of Asher as a tyrannical, unstable leader who ruled through fear. It was a smear campaign of epic proportions, designed to dismantle Asher's reputation brick by painstaking brick. The elaborate charade Asher Vance had meticulously constructed, the one where he was Mr. Vance, the patient with sensitive male issues, was now firmly in place. He had used his vast resources, his unparalleled strategic mind, not to close a multi-billion-dollar deal, but to ensure his continued, discreet access to Luna Hayes. And Luna, earnest and compassionate, remained utterly oblivious, diligently focused on her perceived patient's well-being. The public confession was a sign of weakness, not strength, Elias told a reporter, his voice dripping with false concern. It shows a lack of judgment, an emotional instability that is simply unacceptable for a CEO of Asher's stature. Vance Corp needs strong, stable leadership, not a man battling his personal demons in public. You see Asher, during his sessions, subtly guiding the conversation, weaving a fabricated medical history that was just plausible enough to satisfy Luna's professional curiosity without raising alarm bells. He spoke of a demanding, high-stress lifestyle, a history of emotional repression, and a vague, non-specific trauma from his past that he claimed contributed to his condition. Luna, with her empathetic nature, absorbed it all, nodding thoughtfully, her green eyes filled with genuine concern. It was like a master playwright crafting a compelling backstory for his most complex character. Knowing every detail would serve a purpose. The attacks were relentless, hitting Asher from every angle. Vance Corp's stock price began to plummet, not just a dip, but a steady, alarming decline. Major investors, spooked by the constant barrage of negative press and Elias's aggressive takeover bid, began to pull out. Board members, once loyal, started to waver, their faces etched with concern over the company's future. The critical acquisition deal, which Asher had fought so hard to salvage, was now on the verge of collapse again. He orchestrated further appointments with a precision that would make a military general proud. Ms. Albright, his ever-efficient assistant, became an unwitting accomplice, scheduling the stress management sessions with Luna's clinic, ensuring they fit seamlessly into Asher's demanding corporate calendar. He even had a dedicated, encrypted phone line set up, routed through a series of proxies, for Luna to contact him, should she need to, ensuring his true identity remained hidden. You see Asher, his face gaunt with exhaustion, battling on multiple fronts. He was in constant meetings with his legal team, his PR team, his financial advisors, trying to counter Elias's relentless attacks. He issued rebuttals, presented counter-evidence, and rallied his remaining loyalists. But Elias's narrative, fueled by Asher's own public confession, was proving incredibly difficult to combat. The public, always eager for scandal, was buying into the story of the unstable CEO. Luna, for her part, was deeply invested. She saw Asher not as the cold CEO, but as a deeply troubled man, burdened by immense pressure, struggling with a sensitive issue he was too proud to admit. Her compassion for him deepened with each encounter. She researched alternative therapies, devoured medical journals on stress-induced physiological responses, and even consulted with some of her more experienced mentors without revealing Asher's identity. Of course, for advice on complex cases, she believed she was on the cusp of a breakthrough, genuinely helping a man who desperately needed it. The most insidious part of Elias's attack was his relentless use of Luna Hayes. He continued to portray her as the innocent victim, the vulnerable intern exploited by a powerful, emotionally disturbed CEO. He leaked more details about her financial struggles, subtly implying that Asher had taken advantage of her desperation. He even arranged for staged interviews with actors posing as concerned friends of Luna, who would express their worry for her well-being and condemn Asher's actions. You see Luna, late at night, hunched over her textbooks, her brow furrowed in concentration. She was trying to piece together the puzzle of Mr. Vance, his symptoms, his guardedness, his occasional flashes of vulnerability. It all pointed to a deeply rooted psychological component. She believed that if she could just unlock that emotional blockage, the physical manifestation would resolve itself. Her dedication was unwavering, fueled by her innate desire to heal and her growing empathy for her enigmatic patient. Ms. Hayes is a compassionate young woman who was unfortunately caught in Asher Vance's web of deception, Elias stated publicly, his voice dripping with false sympathy. Her story is a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power and emotional instability in corporate leadership. He was using Luna's pain, her humiliation, as a weapon against Asher, utterly disregarding the human cost. Asher, meanwhile, found himself increasingly captivated by Luna's world. He learned about her struggles, her relentless work ethic, her unwavering devotion to her younger sister, Lily, whose chronic illness was a constant financial and emotional burden. He saw the subtle signs of her exhaustion, the faint shadows under her eyes, the occasional tremor in her hands, and a fierce, protective instinct, entirely new to him, began to stir within his chest. He wanted to help her, to ease her burdens, to make her life a little easier, but he couldn't, not without revealing his true identity and shattering the fragile trust they had built. Asher's heart ached with a raw, protective fury. He could fight Elias's corporate attacks, his legal battles, but to see Luna's name dragged through the mud, her integrity questioned, her pain exploited for Elias's selfish gain, it was unbearable. He wanted to shield her, to protect her from the cruel glare of the media, but he was powerless. His attempts to reach her were still met with silence, her trust shattered beyond repair. He began to discreetly use his resources to alleviate some of Luna's burdens. An anonymous donation to the hospital's pediatric oncology ward, where Lily was treated, earmarked for uninsured patients. A sudden, unexpected scholarship opportunity that appeared for Luna's medical school tuition, seemingly from an anonymous philanthropic foundation. He ensured these acts of kindness were untraceable, wanting no credit, only the knowledge that he was easing her load. It was like a benevolent, invisible guardian angel pulling strings from the shadows. He knew Elias's strategy was working. The board was becoming increasingly restless, murmuring about a vote of no confidence. Investors were demanding answers. The media was a feeding frenzy. Asher Vance, once the unshakable titan, was now teetering on the brink of losing everything. His empire, his reputation, his legacy, all were crumbling under the relentless assault of his own cousin. During their sessions, the conversations deepened. Asher found himself sharing more about his past, his demanding father, the relentless pressure to excel. He spoke of the emotional void he had always felt, the inability to form genuine connections. Luna listened intently, offering empathetic responses, guiding him through breathing exercises and visualization techniques. She believed she was helping him confront his emotional blockages, unaware that she was, in fact, helping him confront the very walls around his heart. The panic was no longer just about losing Luna, it was about losing his entire world. He had exposed his vulnerability, not just to Luna, but to the public, and Elias had seized on it with ruthless efficiency. He had fought for love, for redemption, but in doing so, he had opened himself up to an attack he had never anticipated. He was facing the ultimate test, not just of his leadership, but of his very spirit. He was cornered, vulnerable, and the future of Vance Corp, and his own future, hung precariously in the balance. He found himself subtly testing her, dropping hints about his real life, his real power, just to see if she would react, if her genuine nature would crack under the weight of his status. He'd casually mention a private jet trip he had taken, or a multi-million-dollar deal he'd just closed. Luna would nod, her eyes focused on his perceived stress levels, offering a sympathetic, "That sounds like a lot of pressure. Mr. Vance, remember to breathe." Her unwavering focus on him, the patient rather than him, the CEO, was both frustrating and incredibly endearing. The relentless storm unleashed by Elias Thorne raged, threatening to consume Asher Vance and dismantle Vance Corp. Asher fought back with grim determination, but the sheer scale of Elias's smear campaign, fueled by Asher's public confession, was proving devastating. Yet, amidst the chaos, a quiet internal battle was also raging within Luna Hayes, a battle between deep-seated betrayal and a burgeoning, unsettling compassion. He wanted to confess, to reveal everything, to tell her he wasn't just Mr. Vance, the patient, but Asher Vance, the CEO of Vance Corp., the man whose condition was far more complex than she imagined. He wanted to tell her that she, a bold, slightly chaotic medical intern, had managed to touch his heart in a way no one ever had, but the fear of shattering the fragile connection, of seeing her genuine concern turn to anger or disgust, held him back. The deception was a dangerous game, he knew, but for the first time in his life, Asher Vance was willing to risk everything for a chance at true warmth, a chance to feel, you see Luna, not at the center of the media frenzy, but in the quiet sanctuary of Lily's hospital room. She had avoided the news, blocked all media outlets, but the whispers, the headlines, the pervasive narrative of Asher's instability and her own alleged victimhood still found their way to her. Her friends, fiercely protective, kept her informed, often with indignant outrage on her behalf. The irony of the situation was not lost on him. He, the cold, untouchable CEO, was paying a medical intern to treat him for a condition he didn't have, simply to experience the warmth of her genuine compassion. He was addicted to her presence, to the way she made him feel seen, understood, and, for the first time, truly vulnerable. He was falling, uncontrollably, for Luna Hayes. And the deeper he fell, the more precarious his web of deception became. He knew, with a chilling certainty, that the truth would eventually come out, and when it did, he risked losing the only person who had ever managed to thaw his frozen heart. Can you believe what Elias Thorne is saying now? Maya fumed one afternoon, showing Luna a sensationalist article on her phone. He's painting Asher as completely unhinged, using your story to prove it, and he's trying to take over Vance Corpy. The delicate dance of deception continued, but with each passing session, the lines between Asher Vance, the cold CEO, and Mr. Vance, the patient, began to blur. Luna Hayes, with her unwavering kindness and earnest dedication, was unknowingly chipping away at the formidable ice wall Asher had built around his heart. The warmth he had experienced in fleeting moments now began to seep in, slow and steady, a profound and unfamiliar sensation. Luna read the article, her heart a complex knot of emotions. Anger. Yes. for Elias's cruel exploitation of her pain, but also a strange, unsettling flicker of something else. Asher's face in the accompanying photo looked gaunt, exhausted, but his eyes, despite the strain, held a familiar intensity, a hint of the vulnerability she had glimpsed during their sessions. The narrative of him being unhinged didn't quite align with the man she had come to know, however deceptively. You see Asher, no longer simply tolerating Luna's unconventional methods, but actively engaging, even leaning into them. He found himself looking forward to her visits with an intensity that startled him. Her presence was a balm to his perpetually stressed mind, a splash of vibrant color in his monochrome world. He would listen intently as she spoke, not just about biofeedback and mindfulness, but about her own life, her struggles, her dreams. He found himself captivated by her resilience, her unwavering optimism despite the burdens she carried. She remembered Asher's public confession, his raw honesty about his struggle with intimacy. She remembered his desperate pleas for her to listen, his agonizing sincerity when he'd said his feelings for her were real. The letters he continued to send, delivered daily by Ms. Reed, were still unopened, stacked in a neat pile in her apartment. She hadn't been able to bring herself to throw them away, a testament to the tiny, wounded part of her that still yearned for answers. During one session, Luna brought a small, potted succulent. "This is for you, Mr. Vance," she said, placing it on his obsidian desk, a symbol of resilience. "It thrives in harsh conditions, just like you. But even succulents need a little water and light." She then proceeded to explain the importance of nurturing one's inner self, relating it to the plant's simple needs. Asher, who had never owned a plant in his life, found himself staring at the succulent long after she left, a strange sense of responsibility stirring within him. It was like being given a tiny, silent, green therapist. One evening, while Lily was asleep, Luna finally gave in to her curiosity. She picked up one of Asher's letters, her fingers trembling slightly as she broke the seal. His handwriting was surprisingly elegant, firm, yet with an underlying tremor. She began to read. He found himself opening up to her in ways he never had with anyone. He spoke not just of the trauma he had vaguely alluded to, but of the profound loneliness that had plagued him since childhood. He spoke of the relentless pressure to be perfect, to never show weakness, to always be in control. He spoke of the emotional void he had always felt, the inability to form genuine connections, the way intimacy felt like a foreign language he could never learn. He didn't explicitly reveal his condition, but he articulated the emotional barrenness that underpinned it. He wrote about his childhood in excruciating detail: the cold, demanding father, the emotionally distant mother, the relentless pressure to achieve, to be flawless, to suppress all emotion. He described a profound, pervasive loneliness that had plagued him since his earliest memories, a feeling of being fundamentally unlovable. He confessed that his condition, the inability to form intimate connections, was not just a physical issue, but a deep-seated emotional block, a defense mechanism built to protect a fragile, wounded inner self. Luna listened with an empathy that both humbled and disarmed him. She didn't offer platitudes or quick fixes. She simply listened, her green eyes filled with understanding, occasionally offering a gentle, "That sounds incredibly difficult. Mr. Vance, it's okay to feel that way." Her words were simple, yet they resonated with a profound truth he had spent a lifetime denying. He spoke of his therapy, of the painful process of confronting his past, of slowly learning to feel. He admitted that his deception with her had been born of desperation, a terrifying fear of rejection, and a desperate hope that she, with her unique compassion, might be the one person who could see past his walls. He swore his love for her was real, the first genuine emotion he had ever truly felt, a love that had shattered his carefully constructed detachment. He begged for her forgiveness, not for a second chance at their relationship, but for a chance to explain, to atone, to prove his genuine transformation. He found himself discussing not just his condition, but deeper anxieties and vulnerabilities. He spoke of his fear of failure, a terror that had driven his relentless ambition. He confessed to feeling like an imposter, despite his immense success, constantly battling an inner voice that whispered he wasn't good enough. These were confessions he had never dared to voice, even to himself. Luna, unknowingly, had become his confessor, his anchor in a sea of unspoken fears. Luna read through the night, tears streaming down her face, not tears of anger, but of a profound, heartbreaking understanding. She saw the boy he had been, the man he had become, trapped by his own emotional scars. His coldness was not malice, it was a defense. His deception, while hurtful, was born of a desperate, misguided attempt to protect a burgeoning, unfamiliar vulnerability. She saw the profound loneliness that had driven him, the agonizing struggle he had faced his entire life. The physical manifestation of his condition remained. He still couldn't get it up for anyone, but the emotional landscape within him was undergoing a seismic shift. He felt a profound, undeniable connection to Luna, a warmth he thought impossible. It wasn't just attraction, it was a deep resonance with her spirit, her kindness, her raw authenticity. He found himself wanting to protect her, to cherish her, to simply be with her in a way that transcended any physical desire. Her medical instincts, which had always sought the root cause of suffering, now connected the dots. His condition was indeed a psychological manifestation, a complex trauma response. Her treatment, however mistaken, had indeed begun to thaw his frozen heart, not through biofeedback, but through genuine human connection and empathy. She had, unknowingly, been treating his deepest wound. He started to notice the small details about her, the way she chewed on her lip when she was deep in thought, the faint scent of coffee that always clung to her scrubs, the genuine exhaustion that sometimes flickered in her eyes despite her cheerful demeanor. He saw her not just as his therapist, but as a complex, vulnerable, and incredibly strong woman. And he realized, with a startling clarity, that he was uncontrollably falling in love with her. The anger and betrayal did not vanish entirely, but they were now tempered by a powerful, overwhelming sense of compassion. She saw Asher not as the manipulative CEO, but as a deeply wounded man, struggling to heal, fighting for his very soul. And she, Luna Hayes, the compassionate intern, found herself in a unique position. Her unique skills, her understanding of the human psyche, her unwavering empathy, they could help him. This intense, unfamiliar emotion terrified him. It directly challenged his long-held belief that he was incapable of such feelings, that his heart was a frozen wasteland. The warmth Luna evoked was both exhilarating and terrifying. It meant tearing down the very walls he had built for self-preservation, exposing a vulnerability he had spent a lifetime guarding. His condition suddenly felt less about a physical ailment and more about a deep-seated emotional block that Luna seemed to effortlessly bypass, simply by being herself. The next morning, Luna made a decision. She called Ms. Reed. Ms. Reed, she said, her voice firm. I want to read all of Asher's letters, and I want to meet with him. Not as a lawyer, not as a patient, but as someone who needs to understand. He found himself subtly altering his schedule, clearing his afternoons for her visits, even postponing crucial meetings. Ms. Albright, ever discreet, simply noted the changes without comment, attributing it to Asher's newfound commitment to well-being. But Asher knew the truth. He was prioritizing Luna, prioritizing the warmth she brought, prioritizing the unfamiliar, terrifying, yet exhilarating feelings she stirred within him. Ms. Reed, surprised but perceptive, arranged a private, neutral meeting place. He continued his anonymous acts of kindness towards Luna and Lily. He ensured Lily received the best possible care, discreetly funding a specialist consultation that revolutionized her treatment plan. He even arranged for a small, anonymous grant to cover Luna's living expenses, allowing her to cut back on some of her grueling shifts and get much-needed rest. He watched from afar as Luna's exhaustion began to lessen, replaced by a brighter sparkle in her eyes, a lighter step in her stride. Seeing her happiness, knowing he had a small, unseen part in it, brought him a profound sense of satisfaction he had never derived from any business deal. Meanwhile, Elias Thorne was preparing for his final, decisive strike. He had secured enough wavering board members to call for a vote of no confidence in Asher's leadership. He had arranged for a live televised interview where he would present his irrefutable evidence of Asher's instability and corporate misconduct. Aiming to deliver the fatal blow to Vance Corp, he was confident of his victory. He had underestimated Asher's resilience, and more importantly, the unexpected, unwavering spirit of Luna Hayes. The irony of the situation was not lost on him. He, the cold, untouchable CEO, was paying a medical intern to treat him for a condition he didn't have, simply to experience the warmth of her genuine compassion. He was addicted to her presence, to the way she made him feel seen, understood, and, for the first time, truly vulnerable. He was falling, uncontrollably, for Luna Hayes. And the deeper he fell, the more precarious his web of deception became. He knew, with a chilling certainty, that the truth would eventually come out. And when it did, he risked losing the only person who had ever managed to thaw his frozen heart. The thought of losing her, of returning to the cold, empty existence he had once accepted, filled him with a panic far greater than any business crisis. You see Elias, a smug smile on his face, rehearsing his lines for the interview. He believed he had won. He had no idea that Luna, the vulnerable intern he had so carelessly exploited, was about to become the unexpected catalyst for his downfall. As Asher Vance continued to fall, uncontrollably, for Luna Hayes, oblivious to his true identity, the subtle shifts in his behavior did not go unnoticed by everyone. While his immediate team attributed his newfound lightness to stress management, there was one person in his orbit whose sharp, predatory instincts sniffed out an opportunity in Asher's distraction: Elias Thorne, Asher's ambitious and ruthless cousin, and a man who had long coveted control of Vance Corp. Luna, preparing for her meeting with Asher, felt a profound sense of trepidation. She was still hurt, still wary, but her compassion, her innate desire to heal, compelled her forward. She carried with her not just her own pain, but a growing understanding of Asher's. She knew that her unique perspective, her accidental treatment, might be the key to not only his redemption, but also to exposing Elias's true malice. You see Elias, a sleek, impeccably dressed figure, sitting in his own opulent office 2 floors below Asher's. His eyes, cold and calculating, were fixed on a screen displaying Asher's meticulously detailed schedule. Elias was not just a board member, he was a rival, a viper in the corporate garden, patiently waiting for a weakness, a misstep, anything that could give him an edge in his relentless pursuit of the CEO's chair. He had always resented Asher's effortless brilliance, his unshakable control, and the seemingly impenetrable fortress of his personal life. She had also done some digging. While Asher's letters painted a picture of his emotional trauma, Luna, with her medical and scientific mind, began to look for external corroboration. She quietly contacted a few of Asher's former childhood nannies and tutors, discreetly asking about his early life, his parents, the atmosphere in his home. The stories she heard confirmed Asher's accounts of a cold, demanding, emotionally barren upbringing. This wasn't just his perception, it was a verifiable truth. Lately, however, Elias had noticed a pattern. Asher, the workaholic who rarely left his office before midnight, was now consistently leaving by late afternoon, twice a week, and his mood, while still reserved, had softened, almost imperceptibly. Elias had seen the rare, fleeting smiles, the subtle relaxation in Asher's usually rigid posture. These changes, while seemingly positive, were, to Elias's cynical mind, a sign of vulnerability. Asher was distracted. Asher was human, and that meant he was exploitable. She also remembered a subtle detail from one of Asher's early sessions, a fleeting mention of a specific, rare neurological condition his mother had suffered from, which had caused her to be emotionally distant and unresponsive. At the time, Luna had dismissed it as a tangential detail. Now, she researched it. The condition, a rare form of frontotemporal dementia, could indeed manifest with severe emotional blunting and a lack of empathy, often mistaken for coldness or cruelty. This was a crucial piece of the puzzle, a secret Asher himself might not have fully understood the implications of, and one that could explain his father's own emotional armor. It was a genetic predisposition, a hidden trauma passed down, that had shaped Asher's entire life. "Ms. Albright," Elias murmured into his intercom, his voice smooth as silk, "could you perhaps share Mr. Vance's updated stress management schedule with me? I'm considering implementing a similar program for my own team, and I'd be curious to see his approach." Luna realized that Asher's coldness was not just a psychological defense mechanism, but potentially rooted in a generational pattern of emotional unavailability, influenced by a genetic predisposition. This understanding deepened her compassion, offering a scientific explanation for a lifetime of emotional pain. It was a twist she never saw coming, a hidden truth that could explain Asher's deepest vulnerability and his initial deception. And it was a truth that could help him, both personally and professionally, against Elias's ruthless attacks. Ms. Albright, ever professional, responded politely. Mr. Thorne, Mr. Vance's personal appointments are, as you know, highly confidential. I can, however, provide you with general information on corporate wellness programs. The meeting between Luna and Asher, arranged by Ms. Reed, was held in a quiet, private room at a neutral location. The air was thick with unspoken emotions: hurt, regret, trepidation, and a fragile thread of hope. Asher sat across from Luna, his usual CEO demeanor replaced by a raw vulnerability. Luna, though still wary, carried a newfound understanding, a compassion tempered by the pain of his deception. Elias smiled, a thin, humorless curve of his lips. Of course, Ms. Albright, my apologies. Just a passing thought. He hung up, his eyes narrowing. Highly confidential. That confirmed it. Asher had a secret, and Elias was going to find out what it was. You see, Luna, her emerald eyes fixed on Asher, not with anger, but with a complex mix of sorrow and empathy. She had read his letters, researched his mother's rare condition, and spoken to his former tutors. She understood now the depth of his emotional scars, the generational trauma that had shaped his coldness and his inability to connect. He began to discreetly investigate, leveraging his own network of contacts, planting subtle questions, observing Asher's movements with a hawk-like intensity. He noticed Asher's executive car, usually driven by his personal chauffeur, was sometimes parked in unusual locations, far from the usual corporate haunts. He noticed Asher's phone usage, a slight increase in calls to an unknown, untraceable number. He even noticed the subtle scent of something floral, something distinctly not Asher's usual expensive cologne, lingering in the air around Asher's desk after his afternoon sessions. Asher, Luna began, her voice soft but firm. I read your letters, and I did some research about your mother's condition, about frontotemporal dementia. Elias had a reputation for ruthlessness, and he lived up to it. He hired a private investigator, a shadowy figure known for his ability to unearth even the most deeply buried secrets. I want to know everything about Asher's recent activities outside of Vance Corp, Elias instructed, his voice low and precise. Every meeting, every person he sees, every detail. And I want it discreet, very discreet. Asher flinched, his eyes widening slightly. That was a secret he hadn't even fully understood himself, a piece of his past he had never connected to his own emotional block. How did you know? The investigator, a man named Silas, was efficient. Within days, Elias began to receive reports. They detailed Asher's twice-weekly visits to a small, unassuming medical clinic in a less affluent part of the city. They described a young, fiery-haired medical intern named Luna Hayes, who was Asher's consistent contact. And then, the more intriguing details, Asher, the CEO, entering the clinic looking tense and guarded, and emerging hours later looking subtly lighter. Almost content? My medical instincts, Luna replied, a faint, sad smile touching her lips. You mentioned it once, fleetingly, in a session. I dismissed it then. But after reading your letters and seeing the pattern, it made sense. It's a rare condition, but it can cause severe emotional blunting, a lack of empathy. It's not malice, it's a neurological reality. And if your father grew up with that, if he internalized that as normal, it explains a lot about your own emotional armor. Elias frowned at the reports. A medical intern. What kind of stress management involved a young, unknown intern in a rundown clinic? His mind, accustomed to seeing every interaction as a power play, immediately jumped to the most cynical conclusion. Asher, the cold, unapproachable CEO, must be involved in some kind of illicit affair, or perhaps a desperate attempt to deal with a secret, embarrassing medical condition. And either way, it was a weakness, a crack in the armor, an opportunity. Asher stared at her, utterly stunned. She hadn't just forgiven him, she had understood him, on a level no one ever had. She had seen the scientific explanation behind his lifelong pain, the root cause of his coldness. Tears, hot and unexpected, welled in his eyes, blurring her image. Luna, He instructed Silas to dig deeper into Luna Hayes. He wanted to know everything about her background, her family, her financial situation. He suspected she was either a gold digger or perhaps being manipulated by Asher. He saw her as a pawn, a tool to be exploited in his grand scheme to undermine his cousin. It was like finding a loose thread in a perfectly tailored suit and knowing that if you pull it hard enough, the whole thing will unravel. "You lied to me, Asher," Luna continued, her voice firm once more, ensuring he understood the gravity of his actions. "You manipulated me. You used my compassion. And that hurt me deeply. But I also see the man you are now. The man who is genuinely trying to heal. The man who is being ruthlessly attacked by his own family." She paused, her gaze unwavering. "Elias Thorne is trying to destroy you. And he's using my story, and your vulnerability, to do it." Meanwhile, Asher, blinded by his burgeoning feelings for Luna, remained largely oblivious to Elias's machinations. He was too consumed by the unfamiliar warmth in his heart, by the profound connection he felt with Luna. He was too busy navigating the exhilarating, terrifying landscape of falling in love for the first time. He believed his deception was foolproof, his secret well guarded. He underestimated Elias's relentless ambition and his capacity for ruthlessness. Asher nodded, his jaw tight. "I know. He's calling for a vote of no confidence tomorrow. He's arranged a live interview where he plans to present his evidence and deliver the final blow." Luna, too, remained unaware of the storm brewing around them. She was focused on Mr. Vance, her enigmatic patient. She noticed his subtle improvement, the way he seemed to relax more during their sessions, the increasing openness in his conversations. She felt a deep sense of accomplishment, believing her holistic approach was truly making a difference. She felt a growing fondness for him, a compassionate connection to the burdened man she believed him to be. She was genuinely invested in his well-being, completely unaware that her patient was a powerful CEO and that her kindness was about to become a weapon in a corporate war. Luna took a deep breath. "I can help you." Elias, armed with more information, began to formulate his plan. He learned about Luna's younger sister, Lily, and her chronic illness. He learned about Luna's financial struggles, her desperate need for money to cover Lily's medical bills. The pieces began to click into place in his cynical mind. Asher, he concluded, was either exploiting Luna's vulnerability or Luna was exploiting Asher's. Either way, it was a scandal waiting to happen. Asher looked up, a flicker of desperate hope in his eyes. How? He envisioned the headlines: CEO Asher Vance caught in secret affair with impoverished intern, or Vance Corp CEO exploits vulnerable medical student. The thought filled him with a cold satisfaction. It would destroy Asher's reputation, rattle investor confidence, and create the perfect opening for Elias to swoop in and seize control of Vance Corp. Elias's entire narrative rests on painting you as unstable, as a manipulative CEO who exploited a vulnerable intern, Luna explained, her medical mind already strategizing. But what if the vulnerable intern stands up? Not just for herself, but for the truth. What if she provides a medical, scientific explanation for your condition, one that exposes Elias's malicious lies and his own lack of empathy? He began to subtly leak information to a few select, less scrupulous journalists, hinting at an upcoming scandal involving a prominent CEO and a secret medical condition that was being treated by an unlicensed practitioner. He didn't name Asher directly. Not yet. He wanted to build the suspense, to create a feeding frenzy, before dropping the bombshell. She laid out her plan. She would appear with Asher at Elias's televised interview. She would publicly acknowledge Asher's confession, but then she would offer a nuanced, medically informed perspective on his emotional block, explaining the potential genetic predisposition and the impact of his upbringing. She would then expose Elias's ruthless manipulation, his exploitation of her and Asher's personal struggles for corporate gain. She would turn Elias's weapon against him. You see Elias, his face a mask of calculated indifference. As he sets his plan in motion, he was playing a dangerous game, but he was confident in his ability to win. He had always believed that emotion was a weakness, a liability. And Asher's newfound emotional vulnerability, his inexplicable connection to a seemingly insignificant medical intern, was, in Elias's eyes, the ultimate Achilles heel. Asher stared at her, utterly overwhelmed. Luna? Why? After everything. He was convinced that Asher's secret would be his undoing. He couldn't comprehend the profound, undeniable connection that was blossoming between Asher and Luna, the genuine transformation that was occurring within Asher's frozen heart. He saw only a weakness to be exploited, a secret to be exposed. He would use Luna as a weapon, utterly disregarding the human cost. The stage was set for a dramatic confrontation, one that would shatter Asher's carefully constructed world and expose the fragile web of deception he had woven. Because it's the truth, Asher, Luna replied, her voice unwavering. And because my compassion, unlike Elias's ambition, isn't something to be exploited, it's who I am, and I won't let him twist my story, or yours, for his own gain. She then added, a hint of her old boldness returning. Besides, I'm a doctor, Asher, and you're still my patient. Just a very, very complicated one. A faint, genuine smile touched her lips. The subtle scent of Luna's floral perfume, lingering in Asher's office long after her stress management sessions, had become a constant, intoxicating presence. He found himself inhaling it deeply, a strange comfort in its ephemeral nature. The biofeedback stimulator, once a prop in his elaborate deception, now sat on his desk, a silent testament to the profound, undeniable shift occurring within him. He was Asher Vance, the cold, unapproachable CEO, a man who had believed himself incapable of feeling, of loving, but Luna Hayes, with her audacious spirit and unwavering compassion, was proving him terrifyingly wrong. The next day, the atmosphere at the television studio was electric. Elias Thorne, looking smug and confident, was already on set, ready to deliver his final, devastating blow to Asher Vance. The cameras rolled, the lights glared, and the interview began. You see Asher, not in a boardroom, but alone in his penthouse, staring out at the glittering city lights. His mind, usually a fortress of logic and strategic planning, was now consumed by thoughts of Luna. He replayed their conversations, her empathetic words, her genuine laughter. He remembered the warmth of her hand on his arm, the unexpected jolt it sent through him. He had spent a lifetime building walls, perfecting his detachment, believing it was his strength, his shield. Now, those walls were crumbling, not under attack, but from an internal thaw, a warmth emanating from his very core. Mr. Thorne, the interviewer began, you've made serious allegations about Asher Vance's leadership and personal stability. Can you elaborate? The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. He was uncontrollably, undeniably, falling in love with Luna. This intense, unfamiliar emotion terrified him. It was a raw, vulnerable feeling he had never experienced, a profound connection that defied all his carefully constructed defenses. For a man who had always been in absolute control, this loss of emotional autonomy was both exhilarating and profoundly unsettling. It was like a perfectly engineered machine suddenly developing a heart and realizing it has no manual for such a complex, unpredictable organ. Elias launched into his well-rehearsed spiel, painting Asher as erratic, emotionally compromised, and unfit to lead. He brought up the vulnerable intern, Luna Hayes, as his prime example, hinting at Asher's alleged exploitation. His condition, the one Luna mistakenly believed she was treating, felt less like a physical ailment and more like a metaphor for his entire life. He had been emotionally impotent, unable to connect, unable to feel. But Luna, through her sheer authenticity and kindness, was bypassing that deep-seated emotional block. The physical manifestation remained, a cruel irony, but his heart, once a frozen wasteland, was now blooming with an unfamiliar, terrifying warmth. Just as Elias was reaching his crescendo, the studio doors opened, and Asher Vance walked in, not alone, but with Luna Hayes by his side. Luna, dressed in a simple but elegant dress, her fiery curls a halo around her determined face, walked with quiet confidence. The studio fell silent. Elias's smug smile vanished, replaced by a look of utter shock and fury. He found himself obsessing over every detail of her life, gleaned from Silas's discreet reports. He knew about her long hours, her unwavering dedication to Lily, her quiet sacrifices. He knew about her dreams of becoming a full-fledged doctor, her struggles to make ends meet. And with every piece of information, his love for her deepened, intertwining with a fierce, protective instinct he hadn't known he possessed. He wanted to shield her from the world's harsh realities, to ease her burdens, to give her everything she deserved. But how could he? When his entire relationship with her was built on a lie, Asher took a seat beside Luna, facing the cameras. "I believe Ms. Hayes has something to say," he stated, his voice calm, authoritative, but with a new, profound humility. The deception weighed heavily on him. He knew he couldn't keep it up forever. The thought of Luna discovering his true identity, of realizing he had manipulated her, filled him with a cold dread far worse than any business failure. He imagined the look of betrayal in her emerald eyes, the hurt, the anger. He knew she would feel foolish, exploited, and that thought was unbearable. He had finally found someone who saw him, truly saw him, beyond his wealth and power, and he risked shattering that fragile connection with his own deceit. Luna looked directly into the camera, her emerald eyes unwavering. "My name is Luna Hayes, and I am the vulnerable intern Elias Thorne has been referring to. I am here today to set the record straight." His professional life, usually a source of unwavering confidence, now felt secondary. He still made the right decisions, still commanded respect, but his mind was constantly drifting to Luna. He found himself distracted during crucial meetings, his thoughts consumed by how he could confess, how he could make her understand. His ambition, once a roaring fire, was now a flickering candle, overshadowed by the burning intensity of his feelings for her. She then, calmly and eloquently, spoke of her initial misdiagnosis, Asher's genuine vulnerability, and the profound emotional block he had carried since childhood. She explained, with medical precision, the concept of frontotemporal dementia and its potential genetic links, carefully outlining how a history of emotional distance in Asher's family could have shaped his own perceived coldness. She spoke of Asher's genuine remorse, his commitment to therapy, and his profound transformation. He tried to subtly gauge her feelings for him, still playing the role of the vulnerable patient. He would share a particularly personal anecdote, a moment of childhood loneliness, and watch her reaction. Her empathy was unwavering, her concern genuine. She treated him with a tenderness he had never known, a kindness that melted his defenses. He wanted to reach out, to tell her everything, but the fear of losing her, of seeing that warmth replaced by cold disappointment, held him captive. "Asher Vance is not unstable," Luna stated, her voice ringing with conviction. "He is a man who has faced a lifetime of emotional trauma, and who is bravely choosing to heal. And his deception, while hurtful, was born of a desperate fear of rejection, a fear that I, as his accidental therapist, unwittingly helped him confront." The irony was not lost on him. He, the man who had always sought control, was now utterly out of control when it came to his emotions. He, who had built an empire on logic, was now driven by an illogical, overpowering love. He, who had believed himself immune to the vulnerabilities of the heart, was now experiencing them with a raw intensity that left him breathless. Then, she turned her gaze directly to Elias. What is truly unstable, what is truly manipulative, is the calculated malice of Elias Thorne. He has exploited a personal struggle, twisted a genuine connection, and used my story, and Asher's vulnerability, to launch a hostile takeover of Vance Corp for his own selfish gain. She then revealed the evidence she and Asher's team had gathered: Elias's recorded call with Mr. Sterling, his fabricated leaks, his attempts to pay off disgruntled former employees. He found himself doing things he never would have considered before. He started taking long, aimless drives just to pass by her clinic, hoping for a glimpse of her. He would buy coffee from the small, local cafe near her apartment, just to feel a fleeting connection to her world. He even started to listen to the slightly off-key humming she sometimes did during their sessions, finding a strange comfort in its imperfection. The studio erupted. Elias Thorne's face was a mask of furious disbelief. His scheme had not only backfired spectacularly, it had exposed his own ruthless, unethical nature to the entire world. His carefully constructed image crumbled, replaced by the ugly truth of his ambition. His condition was no longer just a secret shame, it was a symbol of his emotional barrenness, a physical manifestation of the walls he had built. And Luna, unknowingly, was the only one who had ever truly challenged it. Not by trying to fix him, but by simply seeing him. He realized that his inability to get it up for anyone was not just a physical issue, but a profound emotional one, rooted in his inability to truly connect, to truly open his heart. And Luna, by opening his heart, was offering him a chance at a different kind of healing, a more profound intimacy than he had ever imagined. The board, watching the live broadcast, immediately called an emergency meeting. Elias's support evaporated. His hostile takeover bid collapsed. Vance Corp's stock, which had plummeted, began to stabilize, then slowly, steadily, to rise, fueled by Asher's honesty and Luna's unwavering support. Justice, swift and decisive, had been served. Elias Thorne was not only stripped of his board position, but faced legal repercussions for corporate espionage and defamation. The thought of Elias Thorne, his ruthless cousin, occasionally pierced through his love-struck haze. He knew Elias was investigating him, sniffing out weakness. He knew the deception with Luna was a ticking time bomb, a vulnerability Elias would undoubtedly exploit. But even that fear, once paramount, now felt secondary to the terrifying, exhilarating reality of his love for Luna. He would face Elias. He would face the consequences of his deception, but he would not, could not, give up on the chance of a life with Luna. In the aftermath, Asher Vance, having faced his demons and earned Luna's trust, finally overcame his long-standing emotional block. The love he felt for Luna, a love forged in the crucible of deception and redemption, was profound and undeniable. His condition was no longer a barrier. It was a testament to the healing power of genuine connection. He began to formulate a plan, not for a business deal, but for a confession. He would tell her everything. He would explain his past, his condition, his reasons for the deception. He would lay bare his vulnerabilities, his fears, his profound love for her. He knew it would be difficult. He knew she might hate him, might walk away forever. But he couldn't live with the lie anymore. He couldn't live without the hope of a genuine connection with her. You see Asher and Luna, months later, walking hand in hand through a park. Luna's medical career was flourishing, her unique approach to patient care gaining recognition. Her small soap business, Ilara's Essence, was thriving, a testament to her independence and creativity. She had found success and happiness on her own terms, a woman of unwavering spirit and profound compassion. The terror of rejection was immense, a cold hand squeezing his heart. But the terror of continuing to live without her, without the warmth she brought, was far greater. He had been cold for so long, so utterly alone. Luna had shown him what it felt like to thaw, to feel, to love. And now, he was uncontrollably, irrevocably, in love with her. He would risk everything for her, even if it meant losing her forever. He had to be bold, just like her. Asher, now a more empathetic and grounded leader, continued to lead Vance Corp. But with a renewed sense of purpose, he was no longer just the cold CEO. He was a man who had faced his vulnerabilities, learned from his mistakes, and found true love. His relationship with Luna was built on mutual respect, unwavering honesty, and a profound, uncontrollable love that had blossomed from the most unlikely of beginnings. The bold girl who mistook him for a patient had not only healed his heart, but had helped him reclaim his soul. While Asher Vance wrestled with the terrifying, exhilarating reality of his love for Luna and the weighty decision to confess, the delicate fabric of his deception was already beginning to fray. Luna Hayes, with her sharp medical instincts and an innate curiosity, was starting to notice inconsistencies in Mr. Vance's story, subtle threads that didn't quite weave together. Simultaneously, Elias Thorne, a predator sensing blood in the water, was closing in. His investigation nearing the truth about Asher's secret and Luna's unwitting involvement. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story of unexpected love, betrayal, and ultimate redemption, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Stay with us for the next one, and while you're here, check out our other videos. There's always more to explore. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below. You see Luna, late at night in her small apartment, not hunched over medical textbooks, but staring at her notes from her sessions with Mr. Vance. She had always prided herself on her meticulous record-keeping and her ability to piece together complex medical puzzles, and lately, a few pieces of Mr. Vance's puzzle just didn't fit.